Oh, looks like it's recording. Okay, so let's start. I am using Codex as a way to interface with other applications on my MacBook. So, one of the first ones I'm trying right now is OBS Studio or just OBS. I think it's one of the most popular open source softwares for streamers and people who record videos. And I realized I was using QuickTime this whole entire time to make videos, but you could never really see my face. And so rather than use some tool that I'd have to pay for, I thought, what if I could just maybe fork an open source version of OBS and then try to integrate Codex into some of the workflows to help me automate or even help me learn how to use the app. And it turns out that Codex with GPT 5.5 already knows so much about OBS. It can even connect into it through WebSockets. It can control it. So I asked it to like verify that we have the right camera setup, that the audio input is working, um, that we could record a test video. So it says it's recording right now. I'm hoping that it is. Otherwise, this would be, I'd have to redo the whole thing. But basically for this video, I just want to walk through some of my workflows and some of the things that I've learned using the new Codex app on Mac. So in the past, in other videos, you've typically seen me use um, Codex through what's known as a command line interface, so CLI. And through that, you can instruct the model to write code and to edit files and take certain operations on your computer through an integrated developer environment in IDE like Visual Studio Code. But what I've noticed is that with things like Codex and now even anti-gravity from Google and Claude Cowork, the seeing the raw code, the lines of code and the diffs and everything like that, that's sort of being abstracted away. And now what we are moving towards is just kind of an application that runs on your computer and behind the scenes can still do all of the coding and everything else. But what it's also able to do once you give these models access to a computer, which is to say a file system and other programs that it can access, it can start actually acting as the Siri for your computer. So that was kind of always the premise or the promise, I think, of an assistant like Siri, whereby you could talk to it and you could ask it to do things for you on your behalf on device. We never really realized that vision, but with what I think we're seeing from Codex, Claude Cowork, and anti-gravity is that when you give access to the models, when you give the models access to computers, which is like a full machine, not just a virtual machine or a sandbox in a web server, but actually a machine with an operating system, it can actually operate a computer in a very, I'd say, robust way. Even going insofar as using a mouse to click on things. So I think what we're seeing is like this whole new way of interfacing with software and even building software. So we'll come back to the OBS stuff because I really haven't gone too much into it. You can fork their source code and you can build it from source. But I just use the normal installer onto Mac, and that's what's recording this right now. So again, hopefully it works, right? So if it works, then you should be able to see my screen, and you'll notice that I have the Codex app pulled up here. The Codex app is also coming with built-in web browser. So I'll kind of show you some of the apps I've been working on. So one thing I'm really excited about is the Workspace app that I've been building. And with Workspace, what we were trying to do here is, and I say we in the royal we, right? Because it's just me, I'm a solo developer. Kind of building this, well, it's definitely fun to build it, but I ideally would like to commercialize it, maybe license it, or um, figure out a way to kind of create revenue for this because ultimately, with what Workspace is aiming to do, it's you can think of it as sort of like a back office team. So normally in business world, we talk about back office as these are the functions that are sort of not that customer facing, but are extremely critical to running the operations of the organization. It could be everything from things like human resources to the accounting to internal logistics, marketing, sales. Maybe sometimes sales is more customer facing, but basically all the sort of day-to-day tasks that an organization needs to operate the business. And given my um, current status as a solo entrepreneur, um, we as solo entrepreneurs, founders, kind of have to do everything. So because I've been a founder and a CEO for so many years, I actually have deep domain expertise in this, and I also know all the pain points. And what I'm trying to do with this is address a lot of that. So what we're essentially doing by launching a workspace is we want to take in all of the key data sources for an online business. Now, for the most part, many companies these days, it doesn't matter what kind of industry they're in. It could be anything from real estate to nail salons to auto detailers to repair shops to just about anything, right? They may not have they may not have a website, right? Which can be addressed, right? They could probably have a website, and actually, many of them are starting to get websites or even Shopify stores, but they're not natively an IT company or a technology company. Um, but what they would have most likely are going to be things like social media channels. So now what happens is that like ever since like Facebook pages launched and then the other social media platforms grew in popularity, now every business needs to manage their social media channels. So they're going to need to post content on their channels, and they need to do this to both create content for customers to discover, as well as a lot of times the advertising platforms behind those social media channels. So, like for example, Facebook Meta ads will use your existing content to boost certain posts or turn content into advertising campaigns, which means they'll take your content and serve it to people who aren't already following your account. And so now pretty much every business is regardless of their sector or industry, they're also in the business of producing content for social media platforms because that's where your customers are. At this point, Facebook has everybody on it. I mean, I look at my own Facebook account, and even though I haven't used it that much, I think I have thousands of people who I've followed and hundreds of people who I actually know in real life, and many of them are other founders, other CEOs, people who are part of my, maybe they're former colleagues of mine. So it's actually something that you, you know, is a resource for people to use something like a Facebook, even in a personal capacity. But then you also have things that you can create, which are like pages, and you can have tons of pages for different businesses. And if you have different locations, you can have different pages for each location. So the going back to the point of businesses now are in the business of producing content for people to discover their products and services. That content can also be turned into advertising, which can be used to grow a business. And the content is typically, in many cases, it can be channel specific. So you might have short form video content, but even then, the same content you produce on TikTok, you can also distribute on Instagram Reels, for example, or YouTube Shorts, for example. So um, producing content and distributing it across different channels becomes a workload that businesses, entrepreneurs have to sort of take on to stay relevant. But it can become a very valuable source of customer acquisition. So if you have many channels, how do you automate your content creation? And that's one of the things I'm trying to solve with the workspace is we want to be able to produce content that's grounded in the knowledge of your business and publish it across different channels. So it could be, for example, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, YouTube. There are so many different channels. And what we want to do is make it easy for you to produce this content autonomously using agents. But there's a challenge. And the challenge is, in many cases, I'm switching screens here to a different tool that I created. This is going to be integrated into the content creation pipeline of the workspace. What I like to do is build out kind of proof of concepts and prototypes and then build these sort of standalone apps, make them agentic, meaning you can send prompts and then you can create the product, create the outputs, the images in this case, or banner ads and what have you, and then pull that into the workspace where it's already plugged into the agent flow, assign an agent to it, and then your main agent, who you talk to, in my case, Maya Chen is my agent, she can then delegate to the specialist who knows these tools. What I've built here is a way to create an advertising image for, let's say, a ramen shop. And one of the challenges is, like, as a business owner, we're the ones who, or you're the one who sets the menu. Let's say if you are a ramen shop, you're the one who defines what we're going to sell, what the ingredients are, and so forth, because you have all the context and it's your recipe and so forth. Now, when we ask a graphic designer, for example, to create an advertisement for a menu promotion, they have all the skills and the tools to produce the artwork and the creative, and that's fantastic. But there's a fundamental question, which is more around the commercials and the business and operations, which is, what is the price that we're going to advertise this product to be sold at? Setting that price is not necessarily the responsibility of the graphic designer, but it's absolutely critical because that defines the promotion, it defines the call to action, if it's on a limited time basis, all of that goes into the content of that post. So effectively, the graphic designer is now blocked unless they know the price of the product and the promotion and the time that this promotion will be available. So that's a perfect example or illustration of how, even in a team with multiple parties, a back office team that has different functions, there's still some coordination and some dependencies that exist, that as the solo operator, as the CEO, you have all the context and you have the authority and you can actually set that price and make that offer. But if you're thinking about it from an execution standpoint, the graphic designer would be blocked or pending delivery of this advertisement if they didn't have that price. And then the graphic designer would do a handoff for that image, that graphic, to the marketing team who's doing, let's say, performance marketing or direct response marketing, to then load that into the meta ads, for example, and to do the targeting. And then to set the budget for how much we're going to promote this offer. Again, that team would either need to have a overall budget that they're then just allocating across all their medias, or they need to think, like, kind of deeply into what is the ROI of this particular promotion and even this menu item that we're looking to achieve. How much can we invest? And let's take it back another step. Let's say we do price this bowl of ramen at 249 baht, right? As the business owner, I need to ensure that I'm delivering enough value to the customer that they feel great about this product and feel it's worth their money. But at the same time, the ingredients I use, the choice of ingredients I use, maybe the cuts of meat, the broth, how long it takes to make that broth, the preparation time to make that, all of that needs to become context that eventually my agents will have knowledge of and can then propose not only the price for the product, but actually what is included and think through like what's the preparation time, how many bowls of these do I need before I break even, what sort of awareness or campaigns do I need to run to like attract new customers in who are seeking this promotion, what are the right channels. So even making something as simple as, let's say, this graphic of the bowl of ramen, and then adding in the limitation of, for the first 40 bowls only, for example, or during this period of time, and at this special price point, all of that is effectively context that the CEO or the solo entrepreneur, the business owner, the small business owner, whoever it may be, the operations chief would have. But individually, the individual contributors to make this are all waiting on those things. So they're all dependencies. So how do we like essentially give enough context to these to the workspace so that the workspace and the agents operating within that workspace have all that information on hand so that they can actually do that. So let me try opening in this browser here. Nice thing about Codex is that it has a built-in browser, and the Codex can navigate and operate this browser, which I think is pretty cool. Let's see if I can log in here. I can get into this thing. Looks like I need to be authenticated. So I know that there is a publicly available about page. And down here we have public demos that don't require login. You wouldn't be able to interact with it, but if you go to new.playbasis.ai/about, you can see the list of workspaces that are publicly accessible so that you can click around and see what they look like even without creating an account. Because right now, the only way we're enabling people to sign up so far is Line. It's not out of laziness. I'm just trying to make this really work in a Line first way, but the Google authentication would be really simple to do. You just would need to log in with, let's say, your Google account, and then you could even have, log in with other OAuth providers. But for right now, I'm making it for Line, just because Line is massively popular here in Thailand, where I'm based. I would say everyone has a Line account here, like everyone. So, and there's so much business that happens through Line. Everything from, coordinating with uh, real estate agents to have condos, sometimes even talking with your team through work settings, um, friends, family. Everyone uses Line these days. They'll even send through files and contracts. Tons of stuff happens through Line. So it's actually a very powerful platform, but it tends to be very Asia specific. Has these cool stickers and stuff, which is like way beyond normal emojis. But that's for another video. Let me get into one of the workspaces so I can kind of take you through some of the new features that we've landed onto this. So there are a few different workspace templates that I've built. One is for healthcare companies. So if you're a healthcare provider, if you operate clinics, hospitals, those sorts of things, I've got a workspace there that serves as a template, which you can then customize and tailor to your business. There's a banking one, which is really cool. There's a logistics, a telecom one for telecom operators. There's a hospitality one now for resorts, hotels, food and beverage locations, and there's also one for the commuter transportation industry. In this case, I decided to go with the rail line versus an airline, just because I had such a great experience taking the train recently from Thailand up to Laos and then back. I was blown away by. I mean, it definitely takes a long time. It was like a 12-hour one, each way a route. Not totally nonstop, but the stops at the stations were pretty brief, I would say. But overall, about 12 hours each way. And there are starting to be more trains I'm noticing coming online with like even nicer cars. So you can have a almost, very much a first class experience in some of these new, rails. Um, Let me see if I have it here. I'm trying to see how I can close the sidebar for just a moment. We'll keep it open here. And then, so for the rail line, I decided let's go with a high speed rail. Let's do a hypothetical Golden Coast high speed rail as a hypothetical new business. So let's say you're the high speed rail in California, and you are nearing the point where you're going to start accepting commuters, and you're going to need to do tons of marketing campaigns and like basically explain the route, how it works. There's going to be tons of new customers who've never ridden in a high-speed rail before because this is the first one in California, I believe. So there's all this awareness and education, and you might even still be in the phase where you're still testing routes and so forth. So this is taking the perspective of we are the company who's actually building and operating that rail, and you might have subcontractors and so forth, but what are all the things that we're going to need to do from like service levels to selling the different packages like this? You might have different class, like you might have premium class, first class, business class, sleeper cars, low cost budget, economy class, and so forth. So, essentially what I want to do is give the workspace and the agents producing these contents and the communications, both for internal facing customers and external customers, basically give my team all the context that it needs so that it can autonomously produce content on a regular basis. Like in this case, it's on a daily basis, and you could even have it so it's like on an hourly basis. And the agents are now producing grounded content, and I feel like the images are one of the strongest points of generative AI right now in terms of capability and just wow factor. I think you can encapsulate so much information in an image, and they become hyper realistic, and it can visualize something and make something feel real, and just sort of it's sort of driving a vision, right? So you're creating this vision, and you want everyone to sort of rally around that vision and to like create a cohesive vision, and you want that to permeate across all the aspects of your business, from the construction crews to the maintenance crews to the frontline staff to the riders themselves and everyone involved. And so what this is doing is just kind of on a regular basis creating visualizations of what an experience could look like. And because generative AI is probabilistic, like no two images are ever the same, which again is like a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because it might come up with something that you end up really liking and you didn't really think about before, but just looks like something that you would really want to buy into. So the agents are now with context collating these images. And so what does that mean to have context? Well, essentially in generative AI, everything is a prompt. So the way we code, the way we interact with the models is we need to prompt them. And you can think of prompting as kind of like tuning an instrument or playing in key. So that once you start prompting it across certain vectors or with certain parameters, you start activating something in the model that lights up areas. Think of it almost like like a neural network, like a brain. So you're activating things in the brain. So when I say like we're building the Golden Coast high speed rail, what are the cues that are going to be on that? Well, we're going to be along the coast. The coast is the California coast. So in this case, you can see like to the west of the train here is where the ocean is, which actually makes sense. The golden hour of the sunset, how that sunlight casts light into the cabin or into the car. What are like the design motifs? What are like the materials, the metals that would really highlight that? And so providing this as context helps that model produce really realistic and grounded visuals. Now, in addition to that, there's some feedback and iteration that goes into it. So there's an agent, let's say Victor Shaw, produce this image autonomously based on this brief, which we can preview, and then it creates it and it creates a trace of it, and it has the artifact can be downloaded directly, the image itself. You can then just preview the image. Um, it also produces a receipt. So like this one landed image with two files, the prompt and the image, comes with a receipt, and the receipt encapsulates how many tokens and tool calls were used to create that. And then in terms of the evidence details here, you actually get a basis and impact. So basically, like the basis is the reason for creating what it created, like the reason behind it, the context, the grounding. What is the basis for this decision and this output? Which I think is really important because now everyone is trying to effectively create this context layer or this basically a database of all the traces, the thinking and reasoning and the tool calls are now becoming part of the knowledge that you want to then preserve rather than just let it be ephemeral or throw away, because you can learn from that and you can update, you can go through the steps that the agent took to arrive to a outcome, and you can inspect and analyze those and then like tweak and improve them. It's very similar to me to something like a Q learning machine learning algorithm, whereby if you go way back to some of my earlier videos, I demonstrated sort of like how these pathfinding machine learning algorithms work by bumping against the walls, trying a bunch of different things, and then essentially consolidating down or sort of finding the optimal path to something. And so what these agents are, they don't have that yet built into them, but the models underlying them have improved. Is how many steps are like how many steps does it take for me to actually create this visual or this agent produced output? Like, am I running off and going and doing a thousand different things before I get to that, or can I do that in like 2 or 3 steps reliably? And that makes a huge difference because that's much more efficient. And essentially, what you want to do is you want to help guide these agents so that they're like, they can take their first few steps or whatever and reach their destination safely and with like, limited wasted tokens, right? So the agents also can then reflect, but we're using other agents to reflect on what was produced, so they can actually read through it, see what was created, and then write a comment on it, and then again have even a basis for the feedback. Um, so this is, and then you get different agents doing different visuals. So you might have one on the operations side. So what would it look like if we're the high-speed rail operating team, sort of again the back office team or the team responsible for monitoring the situation, for example. And then if we have more of a visual content producer who are creating things for customer facing, then they might be looking to like create visuals that the customer would find really compelling. And so they can imagine themselves sitting in that chair, for example. So we're using different agents to provide different context or briefs grounded in an overall workspace, so that we're all in one cohesive, we're all working in parallel or asynchronously, but we're working cohesively towards something. Now, the success metrics and the KPIs is also really important. So we go back to my initial observation that every business now is in the business of producing content on social media, because like that's how we get the word out. Oh, look at that, it just crashed. That's rare to happen. I rarely see that happen. So that's good to catch. Let's go. So that was the rail demo, but let's use the telecom demo for now. But the other thing I noticed was that um, data roaming is like so huge as a business now because the world is so globalized and everyone's taking trips. Some people I think are doing SIM cards, but nowadays everyone's using eSIMs. They almost never take the SIM card out of their phone. So roaming becomes one of those margins for telecom businesses. And so telecom, roaming, and travel kind of go hand to hand, kind of like how travel insurance goes hand to hand with travel companies. now a lot of companies are like selling data roaming plans, for example. And the original Playbasis, one of our, you know, um, one of our most sort of like, one of the products that we sold the most for in terms of top line revenue was data plans. So even though we worked with credit card companies and banking and a lot of in the fintech space, the vast majority of the products that we sold on our platform were digital data packets. So telecom users of wireless internet buying top ups for gigabytes of data. And we ended up selling that through our back end, and so tens of millions of dollars a month of those, which was crazy at the time. And looking back, I should have put two and two together and thought more, deeply in terms of how critical and pivotal we were. But just the idea of selling data plans as a product, this intangible thing, but you could sell tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of data, is just this wild idea, right? So how do we sell something that's intangible, like an insurance policy or a data plan? That's a question that we still want. Companies have figured out how to do that, but it's still something as people, um, it's hard for us to visualize something that's not tangible, right? So how do you create visuals of data plans or of insurance policies? Well, there's like a lot of study in marketing that goes into that, but really what you're trying to do is like create this experience. So a lot of times people will create marketing of traveling and you're like at world famous sites, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Colosseum, the Shinto shrines in Japan and what have you, right? So um, I think I may have also uncovered something to the point where I'm now producing so many of these things using all these agents that I might have to increase my server because it may not be able to load all of this. I ramped it up the other day to really increase the output, and you can see here like the team is now producing almost 700 pieces of work within this workspace that the system is now crashing. So I'm gonna have to debug this. Um, yeah, I think that's a repeatable crash that we've uncovered here. Um, let's go back to this one. This is the banking um, workspace. So again, banking, another thing where you're sort of selling something intangible. You're selling financial products. The most tangible thing is probably the plastic card or the app itself. So if you're in a bank, the question is like, what are we selling? In fact, we're selling trust. We're selling, you know, opportunity. We're selling accessibility. We're selling freedom. Like, what are we selling exactly? And so the banking companies, they put a lot of time and effort into their branding and the experience of their retail branches and also into their applications, mobile apps, and digital services. So this workspace is designed to help visualize premium category wealth segments, private banking, retail banking, and so forth. Um, so that's what this is. I'm going to have to fix this, but right now I am projecting that a workspace like this to produce hundreds of pieces of work on a monthly basis could spend hundreds, if not $1,000 a month, right? Depending on how many of these agents you have running at any particular point in time. Um, okay, I'm realizing that I'm now losing my train of thought because I feel like I need to go and investigate the crash and resolve that. And it's probably going to be a combination of improving the data fetching, caching, and likely increasing the size of or the specs of the server that's running the application. All right, so we're still going to be going through some of the things I've been doing in Codex. The other thing I've done in Codex is I've created a mobile application playbook. So essentially, I'm going to be outsourcing probably in a day or so, maybe a week, of a full mobile native application that you can fork and use for whatever you want. Um, just calling it a playbook, but in this case, I'm actually trying to give it a theme, and the theme is what it, what would it be like is if you could earn money, if you could get paid as like a gig worker, just like on Uber, Lyft, Grab, for example, um, but for doing AI assisted work. So reviewing the work from an AI or helping to instruct AIs or like review, like grading their outputs or like, for example, steering them. Let's see, maybe it's a local crash, not on again. This is annoying. The app is crashing. Can you look into it? So let's see if Codex can figure out what's going on with that. Lots of debugging. I would say like majority of time is spent just debugging. So while that's doing that, I'm gonna add another thing here. Let's change the text content into English and then Thai and export 3 images, Japanese, Thai, and English, and show them here in Codex. So we kick that off because this Codex is inspecting the find the issue with the live demo workspaces crashing, possibly due to overloading of media and non-optimized fetch logic, listening, and lazy loading. And then just ask Codex to use OBS Studio encoding. Do not interrupt it. If so, just let me know in a safe way. So a lot of agent development these days and things like Codex is just having these different chat threads. Depending on how much capacity you have, you'll be able to do multiple things at once. And while you're waiting for one thing to finish, you can do something else. And while you're waiting for that, you can do something else. And eventually you'll have a bunch of these in parallel. So Codex is just doing this. Other things that could be affecting it could just be like network access. So I'm on shared Wi-Fi here. It could be that there's Wi-Fi issues. So Codex says OBS is still running. Cool. So I'll just keep it going if so. Yeah, I see the OBS icon here is recording, so that's cool. This is anti-gravity. So it looks just like Codex, right? It's almost the same exact layout and colors. And this is the one from Google. So as you can see, they're using the Google Flash models and very fast, very cool. You use up your free quota almost instantly. Um, but yeah, but I would say it's very similar to Codex. And then I think the Google Flash models, Gemini 3.5 Flash, looks to be a strong model. It's surprisingly, even though it's not probably as good as Codex for many of the tasks that I'm doing in terms of just like back end systems engineering, those kinds of things, it's I think it's still probably better than Codex on front end. That seems to be the one thing that I I have to rank Codex lowest on compared to Gemini and Claude. And I have to try Grok Build. I haven't tried Grok Build, but that's the other one. But Claude is by far the best in terms of design. I mean, I feel like the the design that Claude does is so much better than all the other ones that I feel like Anthropic is could be competitive just if it focused on that alone. Because that makes me feel like I can't just have only one model provider. I would always want to have at least two, if not three, simply because Codex can be my workhorse and my daily driver, and I would use it for lots of different things. But it will never quite meet the design quality that so far I feel Anthropic's Claude models do or achieves. And then, but when I'm able to combine them, it gets really interesting. Okay, so down the crash. So something I was just working on was the images. All right, cool. So let's look at this for a second. So this is the mobile app, and I actually have the app here to let you know that we do have. So if you can see from what I'm holding up here, this is an actual mobile app. It's running on my phone natively and using something called Expo, which is a development framework. I think they just raised a bunch of money. Very, very cool company. You can actually create mobile apps much easier, and they can also have web versions of it like this. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to build a kind of futuristic company whereby users could find jobs, find work, tasks, assignments that are microtransactions. So you're not going to get paid a lot of money for this. But if you have some extra time, you can make a few extra bucks, right? And probably will have, it depends on the task. Because I know there's companies out there like Mercor and others whereby like they hire real experts and they vet them and everything to help produce good quality training data for the model. So they'll recruit PhDs and doctors so that when you're asking a model about question about this rare disease or this, physics or math problem, like it actually has like expertise written content that the model can then train on. A lot of these tasks though, is like kind of thinking like, how do I get 1,000 people like working on as like on demand or like just like ad hoc, picking up tasks that could help a company or lots of companies get more using agents, but also have the human in the loop. So the agents will go off and do all the work basically, and then we as humans will then be responsible for grading their output, approving it, helping them improve, asking it to retry if there's some visual like issue that the model couldn't catch when it created it, or if it's just not meeting standards. Go back, tell it to go back and try again. And then as members of the community, this is where some of the other aspects of Playbasis in terms of the reputation mechanics, the progression mechanics really can shine, because now you can create crowdsourced quality control and human in the loop sort of AI reviewers and trainers, and then using these mechanics, you can filter out like bad actors from the community. And so like even things like if someone's just clicking approve on everything when something is like clearly not up to par or should be rejected, or just giving everything 5 stars instead of like having more nuance, the the network could help balance and keep the the, the community high quality. So that's where the reputation mechanics come in, and you see reputation mechanics all over the place. Everything from Stack Overflow to GitHub to Reddit to even things like Hacker News, whereby Users earn points, and then that feeds into the algorithm, and then into the ranking system, and the reputation and trust. And you can earn things like achievements and badges. So here you see there's some trust badges and there's leaderboards. And over time, that basically allows you to um, access higher paying opportunities or to get like faster payouts, for example. You might even have things like um, you could help authenticate other people. You could help authenticate or approve what their work is doing. So the system could be a very robust way of like maintaining super high quality because the agents are already doing the best they can, but they can always maybe potentially do better. The humans are checking in on their work. Then the humans are some of the work the humans could be grading each other's work and the agents could be grading what the humans are doing. So overall you have all these systems of checks and balances to really and then like thoughtful algorithm design to really create a very high quality feedback loop with humans in the loop working with AIs. So as AIs are producing hundreds of work objects, for example, or decisions or you know um, tweaks and improvements and refinements and adjusting parameters and then seeing sometimes you won't know if it's working until enough time has gone by. So because you need the daily, you need enough, overnight processes go by before you can look back and see you have a statistically significant sample size. So in some cases, time is definitely a dimension. So you want to be able to continue to run these experiments, run these loops, and you can only tell if you're really improving over time autonomously, like on a daily basis, only after time has gone by. But in the meantime, if we have systems whereby we're earning reputation, we're making our best efforts, we're doing the best at the time that the state-of-the-art models can produce, then hopefully we are, rising as an entire community. And I think it's be very interesting to answer the question is like, what happens when, because I'm a solo developer, solo entrepreneur using AI every day, but and a lot of people are talking about will AI take jobs and so forth. But like the question is like, number one, like offices have an open and close hours, and not everyone works 24 hours a day. So you could have AI working on the other 2/3 of the day that people are not in office, and so that can give you round the clock coverage. And there can be tons of stuff that the AI can do that is ready for you the next day when you go back to work, for example. So to me, that's not really a concern. Um, what I think the huge opportunity though is like what happens when, let's say I have a company and not just two, three, four, five people, but let's say my company employs 100 people or 1,000 people, and we're all using AI. We're using the workspace. We're using this what I call Dash, this playbook, and now we're all contributing towards a common goal. What companies in the world, aside from a very few handful like Google, Facebook, Meta, Anthropic, OpenAI, like have 1,000 people using AI on a daily basis or weekly basis, and not just individually, like very spiky, but actually collectively working on something. What happens when you have not just 1,000 codecs or agents working on something, but 1,000 people managing teams of agents and codecs, all on a collective vision and a collective workspace? What then gets unlocked? And we don't know. We don't have the answer. We don't have this answer yet. And that is something I think is the next unicorn, billion plus dollar opportunity. Because remember, a billion is 1,000 million. So if there's 100 of us or 1,000 of us all collectively working on something using generative AI, how much further could we go? It's like unlocking a whole new mode of transportation that unlocks so much. It's inventing a whole new mode of transportation that suddenly unlocks huge amounts of economic opportunity and prosperity. It's like when shipping containers got invented, or when um, international air, air flights, um, air travel became affordable for people. What happens when you lay down railroads, and have high speed rail, like as part of your uh, transportation backbone in your country? What happens when you implement high speed fiber optic internet connection to all the schools and all the counties and all the states in your country? Um, these are those like these moments where like when you turn it on, when you flip the switch, suddenly you find yourself in a whole new place, in a whole new world of possibilities. And I think that's the missing piece right now is like there's this crowdsourcing element, the knowledge, the playbook that Uber and other companies like it um, followed when GPS was invented and everyone wanted to build location-based services, everything from Foursquare check-ins to tagging locations on Facebook images and like what that enabled. And then Uber was like, you could you could hail a ride, you could hail a cab, and then that created this whole new kind of economy, right? This whole new like fractional work as much as you want, like on demand gig worker type economy. Like that GPS moment and everything that came from that core technology of GPS, which again required huge investments in satellites and everything else, and then enough um, critical mass of smartphones available for everyone. So now you could have things like Google Maps and Waze and, and DoorDash and Grab and Uber and all of the hundreds of billions of dollars of economic activity that created. Well, the next GPS is GPT. So what happens when everyone has in an even easier way, because there's even less physical infrastructure that's required for people to use these tools, because they already have the smartphone, we already have internet and everything else, and GPT is the GPTs are generative pre-trained transformers are now be everywhere. Like everyone has one. Like Grok has one, Gemini has one, Meta has one, Alibaba, Tencent, like everyone has these now. And then it's like the next challenge or the next opportunity is creating that organizational structure and that coordination using a combination of all of the most important playbooks, whether it's network effects and crowdsourcing and supply demand and microtransactions and task based work, um, and then like using that collective knowledge to then refine the next model and continue towards. I think we probably don't even know what would be possible, but definitely what sounds like it could be possible is just way more efficiency. So again, with efficiency, that means lower costs for things. So when you reduce the entropy and data can travel and flow and ideas and good instructions, then you're going to see a lot less inertia. You're going to see a lot less people waiting around for some direction or some good idea. And you're just going to have tons of good ideas or tons of cool things to do every single day that now the challenge is going to become filtering them. Because like right now, if we run the workspace and I ask, all right, so it claimed it fixed something, but I don't know if it actually did. Um, but if I'm in my workspace, here's one. So if I'm in my workspace, right, I'm and I want to create a new offering, like a new product, a new package. Um, I don't have to just guess. I don't have to just make that up. The system could then tell me, like, based on the cohorts that we then now analyzed of your audience, of your customer base, your subscriber base, based on the research that we've done of your competitors in the other part of the competitive landscape, um, based on trends that we're seeing, like, if you created this plan, this package, this subscription, this offer, or if you're a bank and you wanted to create a new card program, a new loyalty program, a new rewards program, right? Or this new kind of data, you know, um, data roaming plan, or a new insurance product. Like, you can now do that, and then the cost to create that is, since a lot of these things are intangible, and to test that within segments is like way lower. So we're going to be able to create hyper personalized products and offerings that are going to be like economical and will work for both the businesses and the users at a way that we've never been able to do before. Like, go back to the example of like you know you know like I want to make a new menu item. Look at all the ingredients in my kitchen. Look at all the machines that I have available to me, and then like propose or suggest like new menus that I could create that are seasonal, that fit within my my resources, the available resources I have, that can be prepared, get within the same range as the rest of our menus do, that have this much profit margin, that are also like inspired by whatever trends we're seeing like on the internet. And then it's like you could create, you could just have these ideas for new menus all the time, and come and experiment and have these seasonal menus and like lots of limited time things. Because in the past we wanted to be so sure up front and planning everything out in this sort of waterfall way, that and we would have these business plans and so forth. But like the world is moving so different, I mean, so quickly, and things are changing all the time. Like even the most advanced, AI LLM labs that have the highest concentration of like PhD level researchers and AI experts and so forth, like even they don't know their roadmap like more than a few months out, right? So like the world is changing so fast. Social media trends, like to be a restaurant and then like not be able to capitalize on that is a is a risk for your business. And at the same time, a lot of times we were kind of we had um, a cost to change or add things to the menu because we have to print the menu out and so forth, and then we'd have to train people. But if you have the ability to be flexible, you have the, let's say your Starbucks or your milk tea franchise, you have all the machines, you have all the sort of containers to hold different toppings, and then like all of a sudden, I don't know, mango starts to become very in season or even popular, or strawberries or whatever the fruit is. And then it's like, but then you want to do something where you're like, let's be like the first company that creates AI generated menu. And it's like, just that alone on the, as social media content as a theme could be huge. Like you would have people like there's already people lining up to go to these like robot cafes and stuff like that. But like if you said, our users, social media, everyone is like helping to influence like what the new menu is, and it's a limited time menu, and like it's this trend, and it's going to be cool and so forth, and you could do that, and it would make it fresh. It would give you a reason to come back. And yes, we still want to have our classic favorites, for sure, those base products, but then like exploring and coming up with something new gives people an idea, something to talk about, something to post about. And I just think that's what happens when you have these kind of workspace type, you know, situations where you have um, all kinds of content, all the context loaded in. The agents can then work autonomously. And if I wanted to, have it use tools to create, propose me what the menu item would look like, right? I mean, it could do that. It could create these things. So here I'm coming back to the task I assigned it. So I asked. So there's a few different things I want to explain. So these images are done with GPT, and they're going to look awesome. Um, Essentially, what the GPT image model now does is it creates the image, and it also has another model on top that can add text and so forth. And that's almost a separate model or separate process that it can do. So it creates the image, then it adds the text. I don't think it creates the image with the text in it into one pass. I think it does it in separate passes. And then you get like these kinds of things, which look really, really good. But if you're doing this for dozens of menu items across dozens of languages, the cost it's not unaffordable, but it can add up, especially if you want to do this all the time. So if you can come up with a workflow whereby you can get pretty similar type results, not exactly right, but getting closer, where you can automate building these out in different languages, then you could generate one base image, and then you could layer on the text yourself using your own thing. So that's what Codex here has done. It's using my own tools, and it even can inspect the image and make sure that it's good enough or it meets our quality bar. And so what I've done is I found that the best way to do it is to like define the perfect end state, then build a lot of guards around it and like guardrails, I would say, and then ask the model to try to replicate that again. So, examples of that is like guides and things like boxes and safe zones and those kinds of things. So if you can do this, then you can actually create images and graphic designs in a more programmatic way. And then if you can do it across different languages, then you're testing your system so that it's robust and it can handle, Hangul and Nihon and Chinese and all the Latin languages and so forth, left to right, right to left, and then do a very good job. So here's what it came up with. So that's what you essentially, the idea here is like for example, I'm inspired because I live in Thailand, I live in Bangkok, and so Bangkok is probably the most visited place in the world. From like, if you think like it's definitely up there, it's got to be in the top 5, if not number 1. Thailand, Bangkok, most of the international flights come into Bangkok, but some can come into probably Phuket, I think. But in one place like Bangkok, you have a place that surges, by millions of annual visitors, and they come from all corners of the world. So you can test like multilingual strategies here in a way that very few places can, because everyone comes to Bangkok, everyone loves Thailand, and it's such a unique and incredible place that everyone wants to visit it, and people like love it. So you will see a lot of places here have menus and things and signs translated in other languages besides just English and Thai, for example. So you might have places with lots of Korean customers, or Japanese, or definitely like Chinese and even Russian, for example. You would have things like Arabic and probably Hindi or other languages in the Indian subcontinent, right? Then you have the neighboring countries like Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam is another huge one, and Malaysia. And then, but these are again going to be costs, and Thailand was famous for having lots of translation services for people who wanted to translate their language into Thai and vice versa, or into English, so you have Thai English. So one way to test if any of our work using AI. So let's say I'm consulting for this 5-star ramen shop, or this new ramen franchise, Japanese food franchise that wants to expand. And they go, what is the ROI on all this stuff? So what I would suggest is like, let's be systematic. Let's do like data science. Let's say, for example, that we pick a language specifically, and we offer a language specific, or for tourists that have passports from these countries, like, I don't know, let's just say like Turkey, for example, or Netherlands. Or like pick a very specific country where it's large enough in terms of population, but it's easy to measure. It's unique enough that you can measure that specific language, right? So I'm pretty sure. Well, let's say they speak Dutch in lots of probably other countries as well, but like Vietnamese maybe is an example where like pretty much only in Vietnam they speak Vietnamese. So you might want to do a targeted thing where you looking for Vietnamese tourists coming into Bangkok. So you create content specifically for those customers. Then you do maybe ad targeting with meta and tools, and you can target by language. And then you run that for, let's say, a week. And you say, like, because a lot of places, like duty free shops and other things in the airport, go like because of taxes. That's why a lot of companies ask to see your passport, because they can tax you either as a tourist or as a resident or local, because there's different tax treatments. So one way to prove that is through the passport. So you could even say, like, for anyone who wants this special offer, it's open to people who have this passport. I mean, it's not to disclude anyone. It's just to prove, like, this cohort specifically. So I would do that, and then I would do that for all the languages, and then see if I see any lift. And whatever lift I get, or whatever measurable thing, would be input into the model, because so, like, right now attribution is so hard to do. But if you just do it based on language, that can be an interesting way to do it. You do the language thing, and then you test this across a whole bunch of languages, and then you can even start building fans and communities, because you're now catering to a specific segment of the user base who could be high spending. They can come from countries that are generally wealthy travelers and don't really have content written for them. And as soon as they see there's lots of content written for them in their languages, that is going to be a very, like that's going to be a driving, motivating factor for them to, like, visit your establishment and spend money with you. So and patron your place of business. So I would maybe suggest something like that. I would use any information that I knew around, like, trends, hashtags, those kinds of things, to then create stuff that would be more likely to organically surface in feeds as well, by being contextually relevant to what people are talking about and searching for at that time. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to go viral. It just needs to be part of that, that current, so to speak. So if you get picked up in that current, then maybe your content will travel. Um, I'd also do things where I could figure out what kind of, like, margin improvement I could get by proposing menu items with ingredient mixes and seasonal things that could either be um, like premium, or even like better cost. If I could figure out, like, if I had more intelligence around my inventory and, like, the time to prepare, the demand, then maybe I could do things like, bulk orders, certain core ingredients and that kind of thing. And then in cases where premium, like, I don't know, truffles, think of premium ingredients like truffles, caviar, uh, maybe certain types of mushrooms, maybe scallops, maybe these types of things. So maybe wagyu, beef, and certain high-end porks and that kind of stuff. So um, you probably look at that and kind of almost from a data science perspective, like, really think about the menu and then figure out what kind of leverage or margin expansion could we capture by optimizing the menu. And then even using things that are somewhat gimmicky but still could be very cool, which is to say, like, this item is created by AI. Like, this is an AI created menu suggested, and then just testing that, and just maybe even for just the curiosity factor, people would want to come and try that product. So that would be something I would do, and then running all of these A/B tests in, like, these bidding platforms like Microsoft, or sorry, Meta advertising and Google advertising, those kinds of things. That's exactly what AI should help you be able to do, right? Like, that should now be possible. This whole workflow from what is the product we're trying to sell? What's the price we need to price it out? Who are we targeting? Like, what's the language? Like, what's the content? Even trying different images, like different angles of the bowl or different settings. Like, all of these tests now can be done, and we just have to make it easy for people to do that. But if I was, like, like being a consultant for someone, and they wanted me to do that, that's what I would probably think about doing. And then in terms of, like, What else could we do around self-service? So whether that's like making the reservation or ordering through, ordering ahead or any of those kinds of things that, again, here and there, they may only be a few percentage points or a few hundred basis points of net margin. But if you add that up and then over time, like suddenly that could make a business that was not sustainable actually be able to survive. If you just had the right margin, if you could just capture and save, let's say 50 basis points, 100 basis points or 200 basis points better margin, like that could dramatically change the trajectory of a company. So that's why I feel like I'm passionate about that. And I can help, I think, well, these tools and so forth, I think we can help companies. And I think that's what the idea behind the workspace is. But initially I thought initially I would do very small businesses, and then I realized that like a lot of the small businesses pretty much just want like social media traffic, right? Like they're not even really thinking about their website much. Um, they're not really thinking about like their discovery in agents, like their menus are online. They're becoming you know just like how we had search engine optimization. Now there's like AI agent optimization so that when they scrape and search for things, like they can pull your information. So basically, how do you get displayed in a chat GPT or Gemini more reliably? There's lots of things you can do around that. So that's on the web traffic side. But um, effectively, if you think about what even a startup entrepreneur does, um, managing all of these social media accounts and then the blogs and to create that content so that you could get picked up and get surfaced in search results. That was such a huge span of time, and it was so important because you needed your voice out there. You wanted to become a thought leader. You wanted to become an industry expert and a luminary and those sorts of things. So you kind of couldn't skip out on that. That was like how you sold your product was like content marketing, essentially. Content creation, thought leadership, and it doesn't mean that you're building out a bunch of like you know, spammy blog posts to like, um, game the search engine optimization results, but you're actually contributing like real, you know, thought leadership to a space. I think that was something that I spent 20 to 30% of my time, and then as a result, I probably should have spent more time in other areas that I didn't, like for example, cost controls or making sure that we're utilizing our cloud credits in a responsible way so that when the cloud credits expire, like because if we just treated them as like something we didn't need to care about, it's like free money, then we wouldn't optimize for it. And then once the cloud credits expired, we'd be paying out of pocket and we had not optimized our cost structure. And that another reason why the company nearly tanked was because that switch from going to utilizing generous cloud credits to then spending six figures in cloud every year really reduced our margin. So if I would have spent more time on that, I think that would have been much better. Writing standard operating procedures, right? Like, what do we do? How do we do it? What are the playbooks? What are the repeatable processes? Uh, the training programs? All that takes time. Um, but if you do that and you codify that for a workspace and all the agents have your context, they'll do a much better job. And for that, we call it strategy. And it's kind of giving it your tone of voice. And so, like, whenever we do anything, like the agent should have this strategy in their mind, which is the strategic priorities, the principles we use when we make decisions, what's our brand voice, those kinds of things. This is pretty dry because the system came up with its own strategy, but it definitely gets much better when it has a human touch to it. And it creates videos, daily videos for you that you could post to your social channels. And it could just be B-roll stuff. It could be stuff where there's no audio. It just captures the attention of people and the imagination. So the strategy document is sort of like your North Star, your guiding principles. And And this is all part of the overall context or prompt that goes into all the decisions that the system makes for you. Um, and then the other thing that I would spend tons of time on that just I didn't really like all that much, and I ended up very headache, right? A big headache is on creating these business documents and artifacts, like you know these these Excel spreadsheets, right? Business plans, or even like reporting. Um, Spending so much time in PowerPoint and Google Slides, and to create these PDF files or these files that we would attach to an email. And it's not that that wasn't important. And actually, sometimes I really did like doing that work, but it was very repetitive. And again, it's like as I'm doing this kind of stuff, I'm not able to like take care of the other aspects of the business. So if I can have a tool that helps me create like very high quality like videos, for example, at much lower costs, or PowerPoint presentations, or automatically create for me, board ready documents and up to date financials reconciled across all these systems, wouldn't that like level me up and then just unlock a bunch of time for me to like either go back and make it better or spend that time on other aspects of the business that would drive more value. So I built this thing called Workspace, and it was in part inspired by Google Workspace, which for years we used and I loved it and everything else like that. But recently I realized that Google Workspace, as great as it is, and maybe Microsoft Office is the same, um, it still requires me to do all the work. So like, it's got this great document editor, it's got this spreadsheet, but at the end of the day, I'm like, oh man, I'm back into doing all this work again. Now I feel like I'm stuck in these tools, and it's not really where I want to be. I want, I want to request the finished work from those tools, rather than me sitting in there doing all the work. So I don't have access to those tools to like build in from like a source like a code base standpoint. So I just build my own. So I just build my own kind of like mini editor to create documents. I built my own like mini website builder, so I can create like HTML pages. Um, I build my own video clip editor and tool, so I can make videos. Um, I build my own image pipeline, so I can create graphic designs and slides and those sorts of things. And then I connected it all up to a social studio, so I can just make make a plan and just publish them as they're created. And I think that's the future. Is like we're looking at sort of the future of these tools. It's like using stuff like Codex to drive the tool. Having agents live inside the apps themselves, so that the agent can be the one to actually do the work for me. So I'm freed up to just focus on. So now I can do 5 or 6 things in parallel versus just spending 5 or 6 hours doing one thing. Um, so that so it becomes more of a coordination challenge. But if you use this tool and you say like if you tell it to like um, change this text content into, let's say, French, this what I've done here is I built a mini codex using the same harness as this codex tool that I use to build this sort of thing, so that if you're not using codex, um, you can use the tool, and the tool already has codex built into it, and you can actually go off and do the same kind of work you're seeing I'm doing here, which I think is really cool. And I can even tell codex, try using the mouse to click each of the top nav bar items, and I'm sure they'll load. So You see how this changed all to French using this prompt? So you're going to be able to say like, make this image, I'll make one really good image, use this as your example or as your template, and then like make 10 different languages and 5 different versions. And then we'll just I'll A/B test them in meta ads, and then we'll see what kind of click response we get from them, and then we'll figure out like which one we want to invest more into from a budget perspective. And you're going to be able to. It's not that you're working less now. It's just that you're doing more, basically. So in some cases, in some ways, you're working just as hard as ever using these tools if you want to. Um, and I think a lot of people will want to because you kind of it's intoxicating to see your ideas and your visions come to life. Um, and things that are very interactive, that change, that refresh, that update, just like watching videos on our smartphones. Why are these so intoxicating? Why are people spending so much time in front of their phone looking at videos? Because literally the pixels are little lights that are flashing and blinking and changing rapidly. And when you do that and you put all of those millions of pixels together and you create images and you refresh them, it captures people's attention much more than just static page with text on it. And people today are trained for that much more than they are for static text. So when you're making static text, you do want to follow these principles of golden ratio and sort of like typography to maximize your chance and like your competitive positioning. So we're not just making a graphic, we're trying to build this sort of, you know, um, golden ratio type layout using typography and using limited, highly salient text, keywords, and so forth, so that hopefully while you're scrolling, because again, we want to see the lights change, right? We want to see the colors flash. That's what all the scrolling is. Hopefully you stop a moment and you look at our content and think about, you might want to come here and visit the restaurant. So, um, oh, it says it did it, but I didn't see it do it. Can you try again? In the browser that is already open. I want to show you guys if the cursor will click around on this app. One thing I'm doing is I'm realizing that when you use all the accessibility functions of operating systems and of web standards, suddenly that makes automating things with like Playwright and these like browser automation tools like way easier. So in some cases, you almost want to make your app designed for like these agents to easily click around. So like you want to use very clear labeling. You want to use buttons that are easy to like click. Let's see if we can figure this out. So I asked it to click around in this app, which is a web page loaded into the Codex app. It has its own built-in browser, and because it has its own built-in browser, it should be able to use the mouse in that browser. Um, I've also noticed that Codex has gotten much slower these last few weeks since more and more people have started using that model. The thing about these models is that like they they exist distinctly. So if you talk about GPT or ChatGPT or Gemini, what happens is you actually need to use a specific model, and the traffic gets routed to that particular model, and the model is then running the inference. You can think of it as like loading into a 3D cube what we used to do on a flat plane table and columns and rows. So it can have huge amount of context to think about many different things all at once. But at the same time, it's very compute intensive. These matrices are in a lot of ways similar to 3D graphics. And so one of the things that the world had to figure out how to do is how do you stream 3D graphics so that you could have lots of multiplayers all on the same server, all in the same time. And we so far don't have that at all with these models. There's no sense of multiplayer. Like right now, we're just loading them onto the most performance uh, hardware we can find and trying to distribute that to users. But if there's a way to eventually make it so that you could have higher performance, just like we do for online games, we have more concurrent users. Um, that could be something that the model companies would want to explore, because right now you get people complaining saying it's going so slow, it's not so smart anymore. And I think that's just because service degradation due to overwhelming usage of these models. And what happens is like once a new model comes out, everyone switches to that. I mean, maybe not immediately, but by the time they do switch, they'll stick to that new model. Almost no one goes back to the older models because like the new models are almost always better than the old models based on these certain benchmarks or criteria. And the models they're improving all the time, and they're coming out with new models almost like every 2 to 3 months. But now it's starting to happen as soon as like 6 weeks, maybe even now every month. So we're entering a phase whereby these models are going to be released and the older models are deprecated, and then we're going to free up those hardware resources to then load in the new models. But we are very much, I would say, compute constrained, and that's why right now it's reading this. It should not take 3 or 4 minutes to do this. That should have happened very quickly, but again, it's something that we can't control. We're sending this message to a server somewhere on the other side of the world. It's trying to run the tokens and send the tokens back to us. The tokens are coming in the form of legible thoughts. So people like what people would read as statements and sentences. But there's also these invisible tokens, which are things like move mouse, click button, open this, do that. And you don't see those tokens, but those are the action tokens, and those are the tokens that actually drive things like using a tool, using a browser. And so a lot of times what we're seeing here in the thinking is like just basically waiting for the networks to make their round trips, and then the feedback back from what's clicking on your screen back to the model wherever it is in the data center around the world and back to your screen. Um, I feel like we're ramping and we're scaling so much right now, but there's still so much more on the just basic platform level, the interconnectivity that we need to catch up with, because the you know quality service, the quality of the service now it's clicking. Do you see how long it took to wait for it to figure that out, and then once it did it, it did it flawlessly. So the mouse just opened and clicked everything, but it took minutes and minutes and minutes for all the thinking, all the reasoning, going back around the world, coming back to this codex, then launching it on my computer. This is like all these hops, skips, and jumps that need to happen. Um, if we had more local inference, like not just on device, but even at the edge, similar to how content delivery networks and Netflix made it possible so that you don't need to download videos, you can start streaming them right away. If we can somehow distribute the model weights or the models all over the world, not just in the data centers, like in the big data centers, but even in like I don't know, maybe even in the cell towers themselves, maybe there's ways to do that. That could be much more real time, and then you could have like a true real time assistant that's providing you like turn by turn, step by step, navigation, those kinds of things. So I will pause this here. and I will ask Codex to close out OBS. All good. Thanks for that. Please close OBS and save the recording to this. That's all for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. Bye. Put this